Hello and welcome. Tiffany Mink here, Marketing Manager for Interview Valet. And I am so excited to have you here for our one and only live discussion of the year. This is the State of Podcast Guesting, where we go beyond the data of that report. It's our most requested and anticipated resource that we produce every year. And if you didn't get a copy of that yet for 2026, I will put that link over in the chat in just a moment. But this report is really important to us because we have worked very closely with the podcast community for over a decade now, and a large part of what we do is really placing a heavy emphasis on tracking trends, right? We know that results don't come by mistake. They come from strategy and intention. So that's why we use our extensive database to track everything that we can, and then put it all together and share that here with you each year. So I know we want to dive right in. So before we get started, just a couple little things there. I did mention the chat, so please utilize that as we're going through here today. If you have any questions that pop up, please put them in there. If we don't address them right away as we're going along, we will be doing a Q&A at the end. Those are always really fun, engaging conversations, so I hope you stick around for that. And if we have any other resources along with the report that we mentioned here today, I'll put those in there as well, so you can check those out. And so always a fun Kickstarter for the chat is to let us know where you're tuning in from. So put over there where you're listening from today. We always like to see those. If you followed us for any amount of time here the last few years, you would know that I'm typically on the West Coast out in Washington State, but today I've since relocated this year to right in the middle of the country in Oklahoma City. So that's where I'm at. And while you're doing that, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to bring on our presenter here, Interview Valet's founder and Chief Evangelist Officer, Tom Schwab.
Live from Kalamazoo, right? On a sunny but snowy day. And I always look forward to this because everybody's got opinions, right? Everybody's got an opinion on things, but the data tells the answers. And for 11 years now, everything we do, we track. And it's been amazing, this proprietary database that we have. And we can see trends in it, and we can help our clients, as Wayne Gretzky would say, go to where the puck is. And so once a year, we pull all the data together, and it's usually right after New Year's Day. And we go into the database and we pull different queries and pull up the numbers and see how they have changed. And we put all that together and we share that each December. And it's a great report. We've been doing it now. This is our 9th year doing it. And it's interesting to look back, and we'll talk a little bit about that on the trends. And it's interesting. A lot of people are making claims that have no data behind it. Right. And I always point to, well, where did you get that? And I encourage people, if you have data, please share it with us. And some of the data we're sharing here has come from other sites, and we'll show those and attribute it where we get those. So, Tiffany, can you pull up the slides and let's jump in here?
Yeah, let's get started. Get you to the right slide. There we go.
All right. Well, I'm going to jump to the data first, right? So there's this question of, well, how many podcasts are there? You hear numbers all over, right? Anywhere from 2 million to 6 million, right? And what is a podcast anymore? That's really changed over time, right? It used to be a podcast had an RSS feed, was only on audio. Well, the numbers that Raphonic, which is one of the databases we license, they're saying right now there's just shy of 3 million podcasts. So they really haven't grown immensely over this last year. Now, they're not counting always if somebody's got a show that's just on YouTube, it may not pull up there. Other times I've seen people have a show on Spotify, but they're not pushing it to YouTube or Apple. but the good number out there is right around 3 million podcasts. And we saw a huge spike during COVID, right? 2020, 2021, when people had nothing else to do. So they'd start podcasts. Now, the thing is that they start them, and 80% of podcasts that die within the first episode. So ballpark, you've got about 3 million podcasts that are still on iTunes and the different places. But how many of those are active? And we always look at active as, have they posted something in the last month, right? Some podcasts are sporadic. Can you really call them active if they're not out there routinely going out, putting out fresh content? And some of the old ones are still great, but if you're looking to be a guest on a podcast and get your message out there, you want to go on a podcast that is active, routinely goes out there. So if you look at that, well, you've only got about 400,000, 398,000 active podcasts to choose from. And I always get amazed. There's a one tool out there that says they will pitch you to 3.5 million podcasts. So I don't know which ones they're pitching to, but they don't exist, and definitely not the ones that are live. And think about it, not every podcast takes guests. And thank the people over, Alex over at Podmatch. They shared these numbers that they had it that there was 100,000 podcasts seeking guests, right? Okay. But of those, how many actually are good for your audience, right? If it's a comedy podcast that has guests, well, talking about leadership on there isn't good. If it's a news podcast, it may not be good for you. So of those, now you're talking, we'll pitch you to 3.5 million podcasts. Well, there's only 100,000 that take guests. So that 3.4 million is just spam. And of those 100,000, well, there's probably ones that matter to you. I don't know, 1,000, 5,000. Because the thing is you don't want to be out there trying to be on every show. You want to be on the shows that your super consumers are listening to, those people that make a difference. And there's also the number of how many people are trying to be a guest on a show, right? And this number has exploded. It's now 4.8 million people are actively guests trying to get on shows. So it's become very, very competitive in trying to land the key spots. And because of that, you've got to do a better job on the outreach to stand out. I recently did a podcast interview with Doug Downs that's coming out. And he just talked about that he runs a podcasting agency that's got dozens of shows. And he's like, most of the pitches that are coming to him are just spam. They get lost. They're AI mess. So he says it's becoming even tougher to get noticed to get on the show. So that's one of the things we've seen. This is not a number that was reported every year, so I can't tell you how it's changed, say, since 2020. One of the things that we have tracked is what platforms are people using, right? People will always come to us and say, well, what do I have to know? What do I have to have the technology to be on a podcast? And it was really interesting. When we first started out, Skype controlled over 70% of all podcast interviews. You remember Skype? You've got to Google it now. Microsoft bought it and then they actually shut it down. Looking back at it now, it was like, wow, that was really archaic. The quality was not the greatest. It was glitchy, but that's what people used. And just before Y2K, right? Or Y2K, COVID, Zoom started to take off. And at that point, people were starting to use it. But after COVID hit, we saw Zoom every year growing in the percentage of podcasts that were recorded, right? Everybody knew how to use Zoom. They were comfortable with it. It's an easy platform, records the audio, the video. They improved. They started to do different tracks, which can really help because when you're editing, that way you can mute people or keep people from talking over each other. So Zoom was pretty much that was the gold standard a couple of years ago. There was probably 80% that were on Zoom. And then we saw what was coming up was these new platforms that did local recording, right? There were things like Zencaster, Riverside. And the way these work now is that we're talking here and everything is recorded locally. So the audio, the video, it's just like we were sitting in a studio. Then after you finish the recording, it's pushed up into the internet. So it doesn't matter if the guest or the host has a glitch in it, you still have this great content and quality of content. And I can think of a interview that I did years ago. Peter Leviton, a great advertising executive, and Peter living the life down in Mexico. Well, we finished the interview, and mine uploaded right away. His took about another 7 minutes to upload, but when it did, boy, it was perfect. And that's what we're seeing now. I think more and more of it is going to these better recording platforms, right? Riverside by far has continued to improve what they're offering. And you look at it last year, Zoom lost about 9%. Riverside picked up about 12%. And we're just seeing more and more of that. So if I was to advise somebody, what platform is it going to be recorded on? Zoom or Riverside. And honestly, today, Riverside's a whole lot easier to use with that. So that's one of those things. I was pleased. This was the first year that nobody did on Skype. The other one was nobody did it on the telephone. Yeah. When we started doing this report 9 years ago, there were actually some podcasts done where just call up this phone number and we'll record from that. Thank God we're not in there anymore, right? The quality has gone up so much more. Some of those podcasts, I think if we looked back at them 10 years ago, what they were recording, it's almost like looking back at television in the 1950s and going, wow, people actually listen to that. So let's get more data here, right? Common question is, well, what day do they do interviews? Now, during COVID, any day that ended in Y worked. And really because people were always flexible, right? We weren't doing anything. We've seen it go back to what it was pre-COVID, right? And I think largely we've seen the world go back to this a lot. Most podcasts are done middle of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Very few are done on the weekends. And we're always tracking this based on our guest time zone. So everything we track is based on the guest time. So sometimes when you see the Sunday ones, I would say those are probably Sunday evening podcasts that are done on Monday morning in Australia. So the big takeaway on this is if you think about doing podcast interviews and you say, yeah, I can do podcast interviews, but I can only record them on Friday. Well, that's going to be really tough, right? Because the data shows that you're going to eliminate 88% of all podcasts possible. And the thing is that the hosts are busy now too. It used to be that they were very flexible on when they could record. Now, so many of them batch it and say, I just do my interviews on Tuesday afternoon, or I just do my interviews on Thursday morning. And you have to be, as a guest, more accommodating to that. So that's one of those questions that we ask clients when they come to us. What days are they available to do the podcast, or what times, right? If you're a client in the UK, right, and we serve clients throughout the world, just know that if somebody is on the Pacific coast and they want to do an afternoon podcast, that's when they do it. Well, it may be a lot later for you. And it's just really the reality, I believe, of the world today. Another one is, what percentage include video, right? When podcasts started out, and you'll have some purists that will say, well, a podcast is only audio and RSS feed. That sounds like a dinosaur when you say that, right? Podcasts are really this on-demand media, and today more than ever, it includes video. Um, it's easy to capture. It's easy to repurpose. So today you got to figure 96% of them include the video, and they're pushing those to YouTube. They're pushing it to video reels, video shorts. It's just amazing. So when you start thinking about, should I do podcasts? How do I get the most out of podcasts? Be very, very conscious of the video. And a few hints here that I always tell our clients, and I have to, my team tells me also, right? Make sure that the camera's at eye level or above, builds trust, right? Make sure that there's good lighting, nothing's walking behind you or distracting. Make sure you're in the middle of the screen, right? I used to be lazy and would come over here. Makes complete sense. But if you start to repurpose for a reel, all of a sudden you'll cut out the left third and the middle third, and you're here and half of your face is cut off. So whatever you're doing, think about how you're going to do this over video also. Where are the podcasts recorded? Now, if you get on the top marquee podcasts, right? And I'm talking about Joe Rogan, Brene Brown, Diary of a CEO, you're going to fly in there to do it in studio, right? And sometimes, well, most of the time it's on the guest's dime to go in there. And I think that format works great for them. But for most people, to limit your guests to the ones that are going to fly in to be in studio there for 45 minutes doesn't really work. So for our clients, and all this data that we're presenting here is for the Interview Valet clients for the year of 2025, only 0.4% of those were in person. And that was great, but it was usually something where they lived close to the host, or they were going to be in the same city as the host, or they were done at an event. I actually believe that personally, I do better interviews in my home office. And you may feel the same way. We're comfortable here. I've done them live before, and it's stressful because it's not my same mic. It's not my same setup. What camera do I look at? The chair, it feels different. So there's a place for those, but I think there's a unique value to having them done virtually, because there's that consistency in the background. There's that consistency in the look, even the sound, right? I've had this microphone for a dozen years now. And somebody asked, how do you like your Heil PR40? And I said, it's the only one I've ever used, right? There's other great microphones out there, but if I change to a Shure microphone, which is another great one, I'd sound different, and it would change how people hear me. And so there's that consistency there. Now, this is one of the biggest things that we report on every year, right? Podcasts are not like radio and television, right? They're more like media, where there's a content calendar. People are booking out, they're planning out. And I cringe when I hear people say, well, it takes about a month or two to get out on a podcast interview, right? Right? We should have the data. And especially when people are professional agencies are saying about, right? No, there's a number for this. Now, I want to remind you that the number we're presenting is for our clients, right? So we're only working in business, health, nutrition, and wellness, right? This may or may not apply to comedy podcasts. Definitely doesn't apply to news podcasts, but this is what we're talking about. And it only applies to those top 10% podcasts, right? Because those are the only ones that we're working with. Can you get on a smaller podcast and get scheduled today, recorded tomorrow, and go live the next day? Probably. But my sense is they probably haven't thought too much about the podcast. So let's talk about real numbers. What's the average time from when you send out the introduction? We use the word introduction. We don't use the word pitch. Most people will say, how long between when you get pitched and they invite you? Well, it varies, right? The mean time on that is 5 days, right? Which would sort of be expected. And I think the big thing on this one is you look at this, the vast majority of them, they're coming somewhere between 0 and 1 week, right? If you don't get an answer back, no answer is an answer. So you don't have to keep following up every week. Hey, just checking in. Just wanted to see if you still wanted me as a guest, right? It's just going to go to the deleted or the spam folder. Our data is probably a little skewed from individuals if they were trying to do it, right? The chances of you reaching out to someone and pitching yourself, right? Introducing the idea of you being on a guest. And then 2 months later, they reach back out and say, oh, Tiffany, I just have been thinking about your email for the last 2 months, and I would love to have you as a guest, right? Usually the ones that we get, we call them long tail, right? That come out after a month or 2 months. It's when we're talking to the host and say, I had sent you that introduction about this client, and it was probably a month ago. And, I thought it would be a great fit for you. Do you have any feedback on that? And a lot of times they'll say, oh, I meant to get back to you on that, or let me look at that again. So I would say for most people, if you're not hearing back within the first week, probably assume that no answer is an answer. So let's build this out, right? We've got from when you introduce or pitch to when you get introduced, the mean time is 5 days. That means half of the invitations come before 5 days, half of them come after 5 days. Well, how much time between when you get the invitation to the recording, right? So yes, Tiffany, we would love to have you on the podcast. Here's the calendar scheduling link. Pick a time that works for you. This one amazes me. The mean time from when they invite you to be on the podcast to when it actually gets recorded is 48 days. That's actually up 4 days from even last year. And it's really interesting because I think there's two things here. One, podcast hosts are busier, right? Their calendar is scheduled out. They're planning ahead. And then guests are busy also, right? I'll get an invite and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to do this one. And then I see their next available is 30 days from now, but I'm traveling then. And then there's another one. And so all of a sudden when the stars align and we can actually talk, well, the mean time is 48 days on that. And I would just say to potential guests, the more flexible that you can be, the faster you'll get the results, right? If somebody invites you, don't take a week to respond or to click on the scheduling link. No, do it right then. The other thing too is that be flexible. There are times where a host will have somebody cancel and they're looking for a guest to fill that spot. Well, sometimes they'll reach out to guests that are already scheduled and say, would you like to move it up? Or often, since they know we've got a library of great talent, sometimes those podcasters will say, hey, I just had a spot, open up on, next or this Thursday, right? 2 days from now or something. If one of your clients wants it, they can get the front of the line on that. And so that's one of the benefits from really working with an agency or somebody that's already got those relationships in there. So remember, it was 5 days from when you pitch to when you get invited, and then another 48 days till it actually gets recorded. So now we're up to 53 days and it's finally recorded. But most podcasts, the vast, vast majority of them are pre-recorded, right? They edit them, they queue them up, they get the show notes together, they get all the promotion together. So the average time, or I should say the mean time from when you record to when it goes live is 34 days. And this is actually down 1 day from the previous year. And I think this really shows that the best podcasters are putting thought into it. And they don't just take the raw file and put it up there. They're editing it. They're getting those clips out, the reels, the show notes. They're really putting some thought into it. There's something in the industry called the Trojan podcast. And basically what it is somebody reaches out to you and says, "Oh, we would love you to be a guest on our podcast. Here's the link." And you're thrilled and you're like, "Wow, they've got a spot open tomorrow." And you schedule it and you find out that it's a sales call, right? The Trojan podcast, right? You come in, you're interviewed by like a sales development rep that's talking to you about your problems. And then after about a 10-minute conversation, they go into their sales pitch. Some of them won't even publish those. Other ones will publish the interview. And you can tell these, they'll publish, 8 daily podcasts that are like 10 or 15 minutes long. No editing, raw podcast, and no ratings, no reviews, no listens. So beware the Trojan podcasts. But the time now from the meantime, from when you get recorded to when it goes live is 34 days. So let's add this up now. So we've got 5 days from the pitch to the invitation, another 48 days from the invitation to when it actually records, and then another 34 days before the world hears it. And so add those all together, they come up to 87. So I always tell people it's about a quarter, right? So that first quarter that you're doing this, you're going to think, "Wow, I've had great conversations with the right people. I've done different conversations. So I know that the AI is going to index these for different things." You feel that it's going really well. And it's not till that second quarter when they start to go live that you actually see the results with that. And that's one of the reasons that, when we're telling people, if you won't commit to this for 6 months, don't even try, right? When people say, "Can I try it for a month?" No, you will not see any results in a month. That's like trying farming for a month, right? I'm going to plant some seeds, and if they don't come up in 30 days and be harvested, well, then it's a failure. No, it's going to take you about 6 months. And that's one of the things that I warn people. If there's an agency out there or a partner that says, "Oh, we'll just go month to month from the very beginning," that's a red flag. You should run, because basically what they're doing is we're going to see how many months you can pay us before you realize this isn't working, right? There's that big foundation work that you got to put in initially. And if all they're trying to do is random interviews, well, that's activity. That's not results. So limitations of this study. Well, you don't have to read all of these. They're in the study. I would say the big thing is this is one series of data, right? This is our experience. We document everything. So when we say it's 87 days from when you do the outreach to when it goes live, mean time, we got the data to support that. And I've always talked about that this is for our verticals, which is the business and health, nutrition, and wellness. This is for interview-based podcasts, ones that aren't news-driven. They're more timely and timeless conversations, right? Usually about 30 to 45 minutes. And they're for high-level guests getting on high-level shows. So, if you're saying, "Well, this isn't my experience when I use one of the services out there," and there's a lot of ones out there. It's basically Craigslist, right? new hosts, new guests getting together, or Facebook groups, right? Those are much faster. So that data doesn't apply, or our data doesn't necessarily apply there. So this is our data, and I would encourage the industry, I would encourage people, if you have any data, share that with the world, right? Everybody's got an opinion, but if we get all the data together, then we can start making decisions here. So with that, I'm going to invite Chelsea, or excuse me, Tiffany, back up here, and we'll take some questions.
Hey, Tom. Yeah, that was great. I always love to hear your dive into this. I know we worked together to put this report together, but still hearing your kind of analysis of it and explanation is great. Um, yeah, and I have some questions over here, some good ones that I'm going to run through because many of these are ones that we hear a lot directly from our clients in just one-on-one conversations with them. So I thought we had some good stuff come through. Um, I'll do this one first since you just talked about it. So if the mean timeline is around 87 days from intro to live, how should I plan around a book or product launch? This is a big one, timing, especially because a lot of it is outside of the control of the guest. So what's your take there?
Great question. Always think a quarter ahead, right? And so most of the time when we're working with nonfiction authors, we'll tell them or advise them, um, start 3 to 4 months before the book launches. Because if you're launching a book and it comes out next week, you can't go to a host and say, can you get this on next Monday? No, right? That's not how it works. But if you say, hey, my book is coming out, I don't know, May 15th, right? Excellent, right? We can hold it till then, but plan ahead, right? We've even had clients, I can remember the two great ladies that wrote a book called Remember Who You Are. Two great female CEOs, and it was all about women and leadership. And they said, I said, when's the book coming out? And they said, International Women's Day. I said, well, when is that? Right? I didn't remember. And I think it's sometime in March, right? And we were talking to them before the holidays, year-end holidays. And that was great because we could go to hosts and say, do you have any plans for International Women's Day? Right? We've got the perfect audience for you. Or excuse me, the perfect guest. The other thing is that this should fit into your ideal marketing calendar, right? So what you're going to be talking about next quarter in your overall content and themes and on your website, you should be talking about that this quarter on podcast. So as it comes out, and I can think of some great clients that have done this. There was one that they had lots of different clients they focused on, different ICPs, right? And they were a virtual staffing company. And they really worked it into a rhythm. It's like, yeah, next quarter, Q2, we're going to be talking to, the trades, construction, right? How they can use virtual assistants. Well, we started talking about that in Q4. Then they started to do the interviews in Q1. So it would come out in Q2 to align with everything. And that next quarter, they're talking about, yeah. So the next quarter that we're going to be working on is around physicians, how they can use them. So they were always planning ahead and looking ahead. And that's where people are getting the best results. What doesn't work is to say, I'm going to do the same interview over and over and over. The Groundhog's Day interviews, right? And anybody that tells you, just go on there and tell your story and, people will love you and come to you. Well, that's hope. And hope is not a strategy. And I think of it so many times. We'll talk with people and they come to us and they'll say, yeah, I did 50 interviews last year. And we analyze them, right? And it's really, well, you did one interview 50 times. And it's almost like if you wrote a blog, nobody's going to be proud of you that you wrote a weekly blog or you published a weekly blog if it was the same blog every Monday. Long answer to a short question, Tiffany.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I like the farming analogy that you use. That's a great way to think of it. You can't plant your crops this week and, expect to get product next week. So to think of it that way, so if you're in the thick of writing a book right now, or authors who are planning a fall release to get in that fall holiday season book market, you might want to start considering in the next couple months how you're going to promote that, and if you're doing interviews, to start that process now. And it's okay to kind of talk through that as you're going. Okay, so you kind of touched on Groundhog's Day interviews, so I think this kind of teased that up nicely. This question is it better to target top 10% podcasts or go for more mid-tier, more niche audiences?
I'm going to quote the book Super Consumers by Eddie Yoon, right? You don't want to keep just talking to more people. You want to talk to your super consumers. And these are the people that are going to resonate with the problem that you talk about. They're going to buy everything you have. And even more so, they're going to promote you to everyone, right? They're going to be your advocates, your champions. So, one of my things that I always say is more is not better. Bigger is not better. Better is better. And so I think it's always about focusing on the right audience. Now, if you got the right audience, now granted, the bigger audience of the right audience should do better there. But I think don't just think about it as a numbers game. It's not. It's not an efficiency game. It's an effectiveness game, getting the most from every interview there. And then the other thing too is that most of the time we've got more than one ICP, ideal client profile. And a great example of this is up till 2024, the fall of 2024, the only person that was doing podcast interviews for Interview Valet was me, right? And imagine this. I didn't get on a lot of health and wellness podcasts. We didn't get a lot of clients in that health and wellness vertical, right? So we looked at it and thought, we've got to get more faces out there, more voices, more people telling the story, singing from the hymnal, but doing it in their own way. So we got 4 more people, leaders in the team here, to go out there and talk. And one of them in particular, Chloe Williamson, she leads the health and wellness vertical there. Well, she gets out there and she starts talking on health and wellness podcasts, and she can give examples and resonate with the audience there much, much better than I could, right? Look at me. I am not the health and wellness poster child, right? She actually knows what the difference between a keto and a calorie is. I'm not sure of that. So what we did is, once she started getting on there, wow, we started to get more leads from that, more clients from that. It was always fun to be on a discovery call and asking them how they found out about us. And they'd mention Chloe, and they first thing they'd say is, "Do you get to work with her?" I'm like, "Yes, I do get to work with her." So from that standpoint, look at the different audiences you have, and maybe you're not the best person to talk to that audience, right? We've got different firms that we work with that have different subject matter experts. So it's not just one voice on the podcast. And that also really, really helps with AI, because the way different people say it indexes differently, right? And so it's going to resonate with the different people. And, heck, I publicly said this last May. So May of 2024, AI became our best referral source. And I would point to having 5 of us out there on podcast interviews, talking about our passion, talking about different specific things, not just doing the Groundhog Day interviews.
Yeah, and in the marketing standpoint, it's using words that your ICP is using. And like you said, if you're working with different verticals, they're going to hear that message how they want to hear it and where they want to receive it. So definitely niching down, and even going back to the book launch. Don't do the same interview 10 times for your book. Talk on this interview as if you're talking to your the health and wellness clients who might be interested in your book. On another interview, talk to real estate investors who might be interested in the topics of your book. So niching down your message to match the audience and meet them where they are.
Yeah. You definitely don't want to do Groundhog's Day interview. And if anybody ever tells you, oh, you just go on podcast and tell your story, that might have worked, I don't know, 11 or 12 years ago. It doesn't work today, right? As competitive as it is out there with the listeners, with the podcast hosts, you better bring value. You better come up there. And I say the best clients are the ones that come out and say, this is the problem in the world, right? Everybody's listening to podcasts to try to learn things to solve problems, right? This is how I see the result, right? And people will either turn you up or turn you off. Either is fine. But if you just go out there and say, I'm just going to tell my story, you're going to just get ignored.
Right. Exactly. All right. Here's another one to shift gears a little bit. How important is my home studio setup? Is there a minimum standard for your audio, video, background recording?
It's interesting. I was just on a podcast interview with Alaric Heck. If you don't know Alaric, he runs a great firm called Ad Outreach, and we started to work with him 2019. And we were joking that back then it was audio only. It was Skype, and this guy is talking about video. Now he's got a great company out of Austin. But podcasts mean video. And just in the same way, when Alaric came on in 2019, and we said, you've got to have a mic that makes you sound good. Well, today you've got to have a camera that makes you look good. Now, most of the cameras that come with modern equipment are great, right? There's the 4K webcams, a Mac, even a budget PC has got a great camera to it. The problem is most people don't position it the right way, or they don't have the lighting, right? So one of the things is always to make sure the camera's, at eye level or slightly above eye level. As my daughters will remind me, nobody wants to look up your nose or at your chins. The other thing is the lighting, right? Make sure that the lighting looks good. And then the other one is the background. I think this is such a great way that you can intentionally, and I would say with all of these things, intentionally come across professionally, right? So make sure that the background is controlled, right? Nobody's going to be walking behind me right here. Intentionally, the door is on the other side there. There's some things in the background that I want to focus on, right? That are very meaningful to me and what the business means and what we believe, but it's not over cluttered. Another one, JB Glossinger, morning coach. This is a guy that he's coming up on 6,000 consecutive daily podcasts. Figure that one out, right? He was doing it before most people knew what a podcast was. He talks about what's your uniform, right? When people see you on video, how do you look, right? And for me, it's typically, no matter what time of year it is, it's usually a button-down shirt, a sport coat or something like that. In the summer, I might be in shorts and flip-flops, but it's going to look consistent through here. And I think that's important for people, right? To look professional, look consistent, because that is your brand there.
Yeah. You mentioned that earlier about if you change your microphone, it changes your voice. And your brand of voice is important, and even though a lot of podcasts are recorded with video, most guests are probably, listeners are listening audio only, but the video is often used in promotional material. So even though your audience might be listening to that full episode audio only, you should be prepared that that video might be shared around to promote the interview, to share those highlight reels, to pique people's interest, to get over and listen to the full conversation. So very important.
The rule that I always use is if I was walking on a physical stage right now to give a talk, I would want to look consistent here. right? If you see me speak, Podfest, Podcast Movement, Inbound, any of those, I'm going to look very similar because that's consistent with the brand. And I think where people get in trouble is like they're trying to be professionals, sell B2B services. I hate the term high ticket offer, but it's a relationship sale. And if you saw them on a physical stage, they'd be all dressed up. And then you see them on a podcast interview or something like that, and they've got a t-shirt on and, their ball cap backwards. And I'm like, bro, that just doesn't cut it. That's like the only time I think I've ever said bro on a podcast.
Mark it here. Heard it here first.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we got a couple more here I want to get to because I think they're also valuable. So this is another one we get a lot from people, and that's really mitigating the timeline to results. So how long should I expect to run a campaign before I see measurable results?
I always under promise and overperform. That's why I always say the mean time to get results, to get them live, is 87 days, right?
Yeah.
Mean means half of them are before, half of them are after. So you can do a lot to, get out there as much as possible, to be flexible, to be ready to be interviewed, to be very accommodating. But I think you got to start talking. You're looking at 2 to 3 months. And I can remember a client coming to us and she couldn't understand. This was early on. She was on a podcast on Monday and she called me on Wednesday because she hadn't seen any results from it. And I was a little bit confused. I'm like, you just did it on Monday. I know. And no one, I haven't seen any, any leads from it, nobody engaging with me on social media. I'm like, well, no one has heard it yet, right? And the host has heard it. Maybe the producer, the editors heard it. I said, it hasn't even gone live yet. She thought, oh, I never thought about that. So when it went live, she saw the results with it. But I think this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? If you're looking for a silver bullet, this is not it. And silver bullets don't exist. Even if you say, well, Facebook advertising, right, gives me results the next day. If anybody's ever done Facebook advertising, you've got to tweak that. You've got to optimize it for a good month or two before you start really throwing money at it.
Yeah, that's immediately what my head went to when you were talking there, Tom, was the Facebook ads. I think it's really reframing your idea of marketing. You're not going to publish an ad today and then have 3 new clients by tomorrow with this. It just doesn't work that way. But reframing your kind of idea of what this looks like, I think is the best example, like you said, is it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's something that snowballs over time, but it's not overnight. Until you get that momentum going, you got to reframe how it is. We're not talking about Facebook ads anymore.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the number of calls I have gotten here in 2026 from SEO companies, right? Whatever they're calling it now, GEO for generative engine optimization, AEO, whatever it is, that want to get their clients, or they want to get out on podcast interviews to get recommended by AI, has just skyrocketed this year, right? And so they're looking at it. They don't even care when the people hear the podcast interview. They just know that the AI is indexing that, and that's how they're getting the leads from it. So they're looking really, really long tail on that. And that's a scary market, because it's not like, well, maybe I'll get on first page of Google. No, it's 1 or 2 people are going to get recommended. It's going to be a couple of winners, and then everybody else won't even be thought of.
Yeah, that's great. So next question here, Tom, and then we'll wrap up. But you mentioned AI there, so I thought this was a good one. How has AI changed how hosts evaluate and or discover guests?
At Podfest last month, we were talking about this. Great podcaster Joe Saul Seahigh from Stacking Benjamins. He was up on the stage and he was talking about how the number of pitches they have gotten has just gone through the roof. And he gave an example. He put a screen capture up there, and he's also put it on LinkedIn. And he's like, "This is the spam that I'm getting." And it was like, dear Joe Saul Seahigh, dear Joe Saul Seahigh, Cumulus Media, dear Stacking, dear Mr. Benjamins, right? All of these things, they're just scraping it. And his point with that is like, when everybody is using the same crap, may I say, AI used wrong is crap at scale. He's like, all it does is make more noise. And he's like, I'm not even looking at it anymore. So he's just looking at people that are referred from someone that he knows. So it's made things much, much more efficient on the outreach, right? There's a company out there that's the punchline for podcasting. And their big thing is you could pitch 1,500 podcasts in the time it took you to pitch one, right? Meaning you could spam them, right? That's not working anymore. It's actually working against you. The best podcasts sort of have that, maybe even a personal email, right? And I can think of like some of our podcast relationship managers. They reach out to the personal email, or some of them even, have the scheduling link, and they'll put the client right in their system there. And then they'll talk with the host about it afterwards, or they're texting them. So AI has made it more efficient, but it's made it less effective for most people. The other side too is that every podcast host has always done a sniff test on a guest, right? So they put your name in a Google search, and they see what pops up there. And I can remember there was a client that came to us that had been named in a Ponzi scheme and wanted us to represent him because he wasn't happy with the other agency that had been working with, right? We Googled his name and look at it and like, no, we can't do this.
Yeah.
Well, it was a long time ago. It's like, no, they're going to pull that up. They're going to see that. There's no way in hell I'm putting Interview Valet's name alongside with that. Okay. Now they're doing it in AI. So you're building up this, who is it? Tiffany, I think you called it. It was like a digital library or a digital assets of yourself, right? And so you used to Google yourself. Now go into ChatGPT and ask about yourself. And so you want to put that in there, because if a podcast host comes in and says, tell me about Tom Schwab, Interview Valet, what is AI going to say? And the follow-up question could be, what other podcasts has he been on? Right. And then those will pop up. And often they'll look on social media then and say, wow, I wonder if Tom promoted his last interview, because they want guests that promote that too. So you're building this online presence, and that's what's going to allow you to either spiral up into bigger and bigger impact, or is going to cause you to spiral down to nobody ever hearing you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Your online reputation is important. And if we Google you and something comes up, then that's obviously going to happen for the host as well. So maybe work on a rebrand there, do a pivot. But anyways, this is great, Tom. I always enjoy doing this. We record on the podcast interview marketing show often, but these are always fun and they're different, and it's a different kind of conversation, and I always enjoy it. So,
you had mentioned AI. I wanted to throw something out here.
Yes.
Over Q4, we were playing around with something, and it's soft launch, put it that way. It's an AI bot that is trained on all of my podcast interviews, all of my webinars, my book, right? And if you go to interviewvalet.com/clone, you can interact with it, right? You can chat with it. You can actually push call, and you can talk back and forth with it. It's my voice. I swear that my team likes it better because there's fewer filler words, fewer like little stories on the sideline, and it's consistent no matter how much or how little coffee I've had. So if you've got any questions, that's a great way to start. You could look through all the things online. You could listen to hours and hours of the interviews, or you can just go to interviewvalet.com/clone and just ask your specific question. I'm always amazed the data that it brings there, and it'll even give you links to where it pulled that from. So if you want to
Mhm.
listen to the original Tom answer that question, you can go there too.
Yeah, I put that over in the chat. It's a fun thing. I know the team enjoys it. Sometimes it will answer us quicker than you're able to if you're tied up with something else. Um, but okay, so to wrap us up here, Tom, I'll give us a question as we go out the door here, kind of your final word. Um, if you were starting as a podcast guest fresh in 2026, what's the first thing you would do?
I would be strategic. It used to be that you could just go out there and talk, and things would happen. It's gotten too competitive for that, right? As you come out, you're making a name for yourself. You're making this digital library. Your time is valuable. Your money is valuable. And we've got this short window of time, right? To be either known or forgotten. So I'd be very strategic and think about, why am I doing this, right? Nobody just wants to be a podcast guest. That's a hobby. And too many people are doing podcast guesting, and it's a hobby, and they're claiming it's marketing and then worried that they don't get results. So be strategic. What do you want to get accomplished with this? Who's your ideal audience? What are the topics you can talk about? And then be very, very strategic in how you do this. Remember that in this age of automation, it's the personal touch that makes the difference. So make sure you're investing in that relationship that you have with the host, and that you're not, just spamming people, but you're adding value to the host and the audience. That would be what I say today. And I think if you looked back 5 years from now, that's still going to be just as true.
Yeah, very similar answer there. All right. Thanks, Tom. Great having you and always chatting here with everyone. And I will wrap it up here. We'll pull you out. And that is it for this year's 2026 State of Podcast Guesting. We want to thank you guys again for joining us, tuning in today. If you registered, I will send over a recording if you want to re-listen or share with your team. So look forward to that. And we will see you next time. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot us an email. My email personally is Tiffany@interviewvalet.com. And let us know what you think. Thanks, everyone.